Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lee Gould, the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Government Finance Officers, CAGFO, your association. We are thrilled to once again bring you a weekly Wednesday webinar. It's part of our COVID-19 community supports. I certainly encourage you to go onto our website at cagfo.ca to look at our curated resources. We're in the process of putting up a forum, but today we are joined by our good friend Anthea from Bang the Table, who is going to talk to us about how to engage constituents and others virtually at a very discombobulated time for all of us. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Anthea.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. I won't leave my camera on. I'll turn this off so that you can see the screen fully. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really look forward to exploring the options that are available for you in an online space, what your new world may look like for a little while, so that you can continue to do the work that you need to do, or perhaps dip your toe in the water and try the online world. So I'll turn the camera off now and we'll get started. Okay, so engaging online during COVID-19 now and into the future. So I'm not just talking about what it's going to look like for us today during COVID, but what is the silver lining? What are the lessons we've learned from working in this online space during the COVID-19 crisis? Oops. So what is online engagement is what are we going to talk about today? What is online engagement? To be clear that what that means, how it can meet the needs of the budgeting process. What can that look like online? How has this changed with COVID-19 and where we are today? So during the course of the presentation, we'll cover these aspects. So first thing I want to talk about is what is online engagement before we head into what COVID has taught us. Online engagement is not about just social media through Facebook and Twitter. Those are great tools to use. They have great value, and certainly many organizations use them to connect and engage with their community. But we're saying go a little further than that. Use a space that you have more control over, that you can create that constant presence for your very specific project, that you can reach out to the community at any point during your project, whether it is to inform them in the early days to collaborate or consult with them in the middle phase, or whether it's about reaching back out to them and saying, this is what we've heard, here's a draft, let's take it from here. It's about having a space you can manage, that you can engage the community in meaningful ways, using tools and methods that are going to go beyond just the survey. So we'll look at what that looks like. So what has COVID taught us? I think my camera might still be on. There we go. What has COVID taught us? We can engage our communities in meaningful ways on projects that have to continue. So what we've seen in this space is that communities have continued to engage. And not only are they engaging in ways to provide information and keep communities connected, but they're also continuing now with some projects. There was a little bit of a phase where people were just literally making it up as they went along. They were providing information. Teams of people were being pulled off engagement, and comms folks were being pulled off engagement and being added to the crisis teams. Things have settled now a little bit. There are systems in place, and now the cities and organizations are beginning to look at what's next. What do we need to do to plan as things open up? And so we're seeing a greater presence of people going online, looking at the possibilities and how they can address this. The other fact I want us to look at that's really come out, a bit of a silver lining from the online space, and I'm going to show you lots of examples, that's come out that's a bit of a silver lining, is how communities have engaged and connected beyond projects. They've helped resource various information and resources within their own communities by sharing that information. They've told good stories where people have done great things. They've been able to be supportive through the site. They've been able to volunteer through these sites. And it isn't just driven by the cities, it was driven by citizens themselves. So we are seeing that citizens have the ability to do that. And if this is the case, why don't we use the silver lining to build relationships and connections with our citizens? Because when you build those connections and you're engaging beyond just your agenda, you build trust, you build partnerships, you build relationships. When you have those things in place, it becomes so much easier when you have to do the heavy lifting of projects that you really have to delve deeply into, to be able to then have those people that you've built those connections with that you can reach out to. So to go beyond perhaps the 5, 50 or 100 people you're reaching in your in-person events, you're now reaching 300, 400 people that are willing to engage with you. You're hearing beyond the squeaky wheels that come and drink coffee and eat cookies. In-person engagement is not going away, and it will still be a reality, but right now it's not a reality. Right now, that's on hold, but your work doesn't hold. And for all of you in the room, you're likely to be looking for ways to engage, whether it is to engage on budgets that have to be done, whether it's to engage on capital projects that you need decisions on, that the money is there and you have to make a decision on them, whether it's about letting people know what is going to happen with the economy, whether it's about communicating out what is, what your councils want to convey to citizens about funds that are available, what is going to happen to the budget, what is the economy going to look like in your particular municipality or provincial government. I'm going to show you a few examples while we're at it. So these are not specifically going to be projects about budgeting, but they are going to show you how communities have engaged in various ways. And we have an entire page with all this showing really innovative ways that the communities have reached out to one another to connect. The cities and the various organizations have provided a space for their citizens to connect with one another. I'm encouraging you to consider building connections with communities and community leaders, or with citizens groups within your various municipalities, or wherever you're engaging, the groups that you're engaging with. Reach out, see if you can't make those connections, because if you can find those community leaders, if you can find those advocates, if you can train those advocates to draw people into the space, that is going to be to your benefit. So that's going to be part of today's conversation as well. But let's have a look. So I'm going to look at the city of Kamloops, and I think I've got it open here actually. So the city of Kamloops created a space where they're engaging in the community. They've created video clips of whatever they've done. They've created, they've gone through the council meetings with physical distancing and showing whether the budgets are being discussed or whatever was being discussed. They videoed that and posted it online. They ran a constant news feed providing updates of what has happened. They showed what parks and facilities were closed, so they gave status updates on those. They provided updates on many things, including the budget impact report. So that was also there. That had to go out. April was when this had to go out. And so they were able to provide this information for the community to understand what has happened. So that is one thing that you consider. And you can see how they've used this space to communicate, to engage, and to communicate in ways that were easy for people to understand. Video is really powerful, but it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be in simple ways that you get the word out. It can be taking your iPhone, recording the information against a blank screen, and then you can have perhaps somebody in your organization has the ability to add perhaps little cartoons alongside that to help people understand. So you can take people on the journey that you need to take them in the online space like you would when you are engaging them in person. You can tell them what this is about. You can do that with a video right here. You can educate them. You can let them ask you questions. You need to start really early though. And my one advice is takes time. If you're going to try and engage your community in 3 weeks, you're probably just going to be able to put an introduction up there, provide a document in the library, and complete a survey. But I'm asking you to consider going a little further than that. Put up that video that says, this is what we're about to embark on, and start early. Start 6 weeks out if you can. I know it's not always easy within the cycles of budgeting. It's difficult to gather the information, have all that information ready. But you can go out early saying, we are going to be engaging you on the budget. Here's a space where you can ask us questions. Soon you'll understand what it is that's a priority to your community by looking at the questions they ask. Bear those things in mind as you go out. So let's have a look at a few more examples. If we look here, the Manitoba government continued to engage on the budget, and so they went out and continued. They ran a quick poll asking some key questions. I know many of you would have seen the session that was done with Chris on the Balancing Act, and we can embed Balancing Act in here. So we ran the government of Manitoba ran a budgeting survey. As you can see, that's concluded. And then they also used Balancing Act. So if you go in here, this takes you to Balancing Act. So they were engaging the community in quick answers that they needed to know. They still had very specific questions that they had, but they also gave the community a chance to help them build a budget, to help them understand what priorities were. And they were able to, in a very short, simple way, explain what they were doing here. They had someone who was listening to what was being said, important links, and then they obviously had some key dates. And as they went through these, this was when they still had the ability to do public meetings. This no longer is possible. So this part of the process is falling away. Right now, the online space remains. Even though you take this away, the online space remains. And potentially you may choose to do, as you'll see here with Brampton, you may choose to run a tele-town hall. You may choose to run a live stream of an event that took place. These are all options that you have available to yourself now. Was there a question, Lee? Sorry, I just heard a noise. Okay, so you can see here there are the audio recordings of the tele-town halls that they held. And this was specifically here, this would have been small business and what the impacts were on small business and economically what that looked like. Here they talk about tax relief. They also let the community ask questions. So you can see the community was able to take the space and ask their questions. So that's something to think about as well, allowing your community to ask you questions and that you can respond to those. And I would suggest that you do that really in the early days. Right, let's jump back here. So just beginning the conversation about what is possible. So go beyond those immediate projects that you have, start engaging early. You may even go out to your community and say, what are your priorities? What is it important to you that we need to think about? So that's one. Others can be ideas that you have where we should be spending money. And you can maybe add that, take that further now. Our economy is tight. What ideas do you have for us to be able to save money? So you can think about what that looks like. I obviously don't know your agendas. I don't know your strategies and what your needs are. But I also make an offer that should you want to reach out to me to discuss any of the projects, and I know that several of you online are also clients, and if you want to reach out to me to discuss any strategies, to have a look at how you can address the needs of a project starting really early, I'm more than happy to continue and have that conversation with you. Right, a reality check. So we talk about trust, we talk about building those relationships and connections. In a recent study in the US, they said that between 1960 and 2019, trust is now at an all-time low. Putnam talks about our connectedness that has been eroded. And think about reaching out to somebody. If you stood in front of a stranger and said, well, tell me what you think, how do you feel? They're going to go, what? If you've built that connection, if they know that we care or you care about what they what they think and feel, because you've connected with them, you've built a relationship with them, you've created a community leader that they know they can reach you. When you've created that connection, it becomes so much easier then to reach out and have those community members reach back to you, give you feedback, feel that they can trust you with their information, feel that they know you're going to do something with, that you're going to do what you promise, that you can let them know what happens with their information. It doesn't mean that you're giving all power to your community. It just means that you're building a connection so that when you need to get feedback from them, they will feel that there is meaning in the relationship and value in giving you feedback. We can't afford not to build those trusting relationships with our citizens. Communities are going to continue to evolve. We've seen how they've evolved over time and all the tools that they're using online. If you're not there, they are there. So do think about how you can start early and make those connections and build those relationships, and we'll talk about that as well. Engagement online is not only about consultations, it's about building your community, and I've talked a lot about this. So, food for thought. Community engagement is not just a set of activities and methods confined to a particular project, policy, or process. Rather, it's a way of communication, decision-making, and governance that gives community members the power to own the change they want to see, leading to equitable outcomes. This does not mean, as I said, you give the power to the community to make the decision about how budgets are spent. That's never going to be the case. Budgets are set. There are fixed costs that can never change. There is the odd time that you can give the community power. Say you have I'll just use a capital projects budget that's been set aside and you have 5 capital projects that can be considered. The community can then help you choose which they see as priorities so that you can understand which one of those 5 projects are the most important. What is the order of priority for that community? You may want to reach out early days when you start budgeting and you have areas of the community that funds need to be allocated to. Understand what's the most important. There was a project that was done in Australia where they were engaging that a budget to spend on a park to redo the grandstand and to redo various parts of the park. And the community went out and said, we don't care about the bandstand or the grandstand. Slap a coat of paint on it. We want an off-leash dog park. And because this was something where there was some leeway, the council could listen to the community and they were able to say, okay, we'll tidy up those bits and pieces, those assets, and we will build a dog park. We'll do this pilot project with the funds that we do have. It wasn't about asking for extra funds. It was taking that pot of funds and using it a little bit more creatively. And that may be something that you can consider. Certainly there's work that has to happen in the city that the budget is allocated and that will never change. But those parts where you can have community input and can consider community input, that is important. And when one does that, you build trust, you build partnership, you build a relationship, because communities feel they feel a little empowered in the process. So how do you begin the process? How do you do this? And I'm going to show you a whole bunch of examples. So these examples will go out to you, but we're going to go through a whole bunch of examples that I'd like to show you. So here was one. During COVID, the city of Brampton put up a site that was all about COVID. And they broke up the areas of their city into project pages all on their own. So they had a project for economic support. So they've reached wanted to engage in various areas and be able to direct citizens to where they wanted to go. Similarly, you can do the same with your project pages. Here they were asking people to register for the tele-town halls. You saw the economic support tele-town halls that were held. So they had video because they knew that this particular its situation was serious. People are incredibly worried about money. People are losing jobs. They're worried about what's going to happen to their homes and just coping with the current situation. So this was set up to be able to help educate people and to let them know these councillors were aware and they were listening. They then held at the Tele town halls to discuss the further economic development that's going to occur in the city. They ran their Twitter feed, and they made sure that they let the community know, here are the councillors, here are the folks who are listening and aware of what's going on. That's really important in any space, is because it's an online space, you want to create a human face as much as you can. Now with COVID and the fact that you likely only to be engaging online for a little while, think about creating those video clips. Make them easy to understand, choose someone who's going to resonate with folks, consider addressing the need for information using videos. Certainly you can have transcripts, you can continue to have the text-based information for those who need it, but the videos are one thing that people will definitely click through. I spoke here about the government of Manitoba. They engaged on moving Manitoba Forward budget, and you can see they use the Budget Balancing Act rather. That's an integrated tool that we have. So of the tools that we have, this is one that you can consider, and you can actually build a budget and understand how money works. So that's something else to consider in the process, is considering using a budgeting tool. But they used a Q&A as well as a budget survey in their engagement. The City of West Vancouver engaged on their budget, a revised budget. They have a lot of information. My recommendation is, if you can, don't make people work too hard by creating headers. You can quickly get them to understand and get through the information, make it easy for them to quickly get the information without having to read tons of it. They will not. It's the one thing a tip I can give you: don't make your participants read and work too hard. Well, obviously you want them to do some reading, but make the information short. In this here, you're going to say, this is what we're doing. This is how you can get involved. Here's some useful information, and create links to videos, to actual draft documents. Again, don't ask them to read a 300-page document. Do make it available, because it's important to do so. But if you have an infographic on a budget, for example, if we go here, it just makes the process of understanding what's going to happen much easier. So think of doing information that's visual, that's rich in that sense, so that it makes it easy for people to draw in and absorb the information quickly. As you can see, they provided lots of updates, but also they had a discussion forum open in which they wanted comments about the revised budget. So they've asked the community to have a conversation. So this is that topic you're going to put on the table and ask the community to talk about. And you can see here the discussion is ensuing. People having a conversation about what is going on. And over here, you can see that information is the city coming in and facilitating the conversation. So this is not about creating your budgeting space online and going on holiday. You need to be present. So you need to be there if you're going to do a Q&A to answer questions. You need to be there to be able to facilitate if you open up a discussion forum. And I'm going to go all the way down here. Oh, they took away they had a Q&A running as well. But you can see 62 responses. They've had some folks involved in this process. And remember, this is revised. So they went through the early phases and then engaged the community in conversation. And now I've provided that revised budget. Here is the city of Lethbridge. They've engaged in their budget as well. This is an older one, but they ran a news feed open mic in which they had public announcements. They invited the residents to open houses. Now you can invite residents to an online session. So this could be where you embed a live stream session, and you get the community then to provide information ahead of time. They may ask questions ahead of time. They may get involved in a discussion ahead of time. And then you can run a live feed from the project specialist or the project lead who can answer the questions in a live session. You can have the community asking those questions during the live session. So you can run live sessions as well. You can obviously provide lots of information for people to get educated ahead of time. So if you're going with a budgeting process, your steps may be: one, you're going to put up a short introduction to let people know what you're going to do. You're going to start early, opening up for people to be able to ask questions. Mention that you're going to run a live stream session, get them to register and give them the dates. This can all happen here. When the live stream session is ready, you're going to embed it here so people can jump in. And here's an example of a live stream session that was held. And I'll just quickly open this up. So this live stream session, as you can see, the facilitator is taking the questions. And if we continue further, I'll see if I can see. Here is the panel that is responding. Now, with COVID, that's obviously not going to be possible, but you can certainly have a single person, the project lead, live streaming into on your YouTube channel where you can respond to the questions. Once you're done, you're going to post that session here so that whoever didn't attend is able to watch that, and then you're also able to have all the questions that were asked in the space, and the community can read them. So here you can see all the questions that were answered during the session are here, and these are both questions asked ahead of time and questions asked during the time. You can also have supportive housing news, so you can have those news updates. The modular housing, supportive housing, this was because the government had declared an emergency when it came to housing, and they had to put a modular housing, so they had to get the word out quickly. They did not hold an in-person event. It was a very sensitive issue, and this was the best way they could get the word out and get the community to ask questions and get information. So that was the focus. Be clear about what your strategy is and go out to achieve that. Here's where the town of Innisfil went out to the community and asked them for ideas. So they said, what is your big idea? What single change would have the greatest impact in our town to make our town better? This was where they had some discretionary budget that they could consider using, that they wanted to see from the community what was most important to them. You can see they made this page interesting. They went out and talked about capital projects and the timelines of capital projects. They used children in this case to create a little video clip, not going to be possible with social distancing right now, but you could create a video clip that explains what budgeting is about. How does money get spent? Help take people on the journey with you to get educated about what money is about, how budgets work in the city, and what is it that they can do to participate. Make use of infographics and photographs. As always, make sure there's a human presence to this online space. Excuse me, I'm just going to mute for a moment. Right, so you also have the ability to create whatever information you need to have to educate your community, but please don't make people work hard. If you make people work hard online, they're gone. So this is where you'll put summary information in. If you can present information boards in the form of infographics, those are all going to make it really useful and easy for people to understand. Here also they engage the community in a discussion. So 57, again, it's about priorities. They wanted to know what the priorities are. But they didn't just go carte blanche. They said, here are the things that we want you to think about. Here is what you need to consider when it comes to giving us your responses. And you can do that. And how tightly you ask the question. You might not go, what are your priorities? You might go, what are your priorities when it comes to health and wellness services? And you may only be able to address health and wellness services, recreation programs, and youth participation. Those may be the only areas where there's some discretion for the community to give their input, where you can consider community input. One of the worst things you can do is get input and do nothing with it. So don't ask the question if you're not going to do anything with the information. Okay, so let's dive back into our session. But there's lots here. So I'll send this to you and you can look at what that looks like. Right, Why would you go online? You want to reach a greater proportion of your community at a time and place that works for them, and hear from the silent majority and underrepresented citizens. So I know this often happens with budgets, that you go out, you organize your event, and you have a handful of the usual suspects showing up. The online space is going to give you the opportunity to reach out to more folks. So, once the reality returns for us, where we're able to once again engage folks in person, then you're still going to use that online space, because and we know, and we have statistics that prove it, that you're going to reach more folks by adding the online space to your overall engagement practice, or add them to the tools that you're going to use to engage the community. So think about how to add the online space, making sure you're using tools that give people options. So don't only go out with a survey. Consider adding that discussion topic, or adding the ideas tool to invite ideas, allowing the community to ask you questions. When they're educated and informed, they're going to give you better feedback. So be clear about why you're engaging the community. Not only are you asking yourself why you're doing it, but be clear about the purpose for the community, so they understand why you're engaging. Identify citizens to be reached online and what their needs are. So who are you talking to? Who did you talk to in the past? Who are those community leaders? Who are the community groups that you can reach out and draw into this conversation? Bring them in early days, and even before you want to engage, you can start making those connections. Perhaps it's about creating a community panel online and letting them have conversations there, and being part of the discussion that's happening in that small group to understand what the community priorities are, understand who you're reaching out to. Then you need to think about the most appropriate methods to reach out to your citizens. What level of engagement are you looking for? And how are the tools that you use going to meet those needs? So what are the methods you're going to do? Who are your citizens that you're reaching out to? And what is it that you need to know from them? Be clear about that. It is not a random act of online engagement. It is strategic, it's thoughtful, and you're going to take people through a journey. Right. So when we talk about online engagement, we talk about a digital-first engagement methodology. And whether you're engaging in parks planning or budgeting, it is still about considering this methodology. We're not saying instead of, we're saying alongside any in-person engagement that you will get to eventually when things settle down. Right now, this is the methodology that you need to consider. So when we do this, we talk about taking the community on a journey. You're not just initiating the project, asking them to answer a survey in here to make a decision, and then implementing that decision. You're taking them through considering the early phases of the project. What do they need to know? Get information to them. Let them ask you questions. You can use, if you look at this diagram we've got here, you can use pretty much all these tools in those early days. But it's about getting word out, getting people to do their research, getting people to understand what it's about, and perhaps allow them to ask you those questions so you understand what they don't know. You understand what their priorities are. You'll understand how they're feeling also by how they ask the questions. As you saw with Innisfil, they opened up to ask the community, what are your priorities? What is the most important thing you think we should focus on? I'm not saying this is the only route to go. This is not always going to be possible with budgeting, but think about it if it is. Just think about the relationship you can build with your community when you do this. Often you're going out and you're saying, here is what we need to ask you about. This is where we need you to provide input. So you're presenting scenarios, you're very targeted, you're very specific, and you may dig a little deeper. That may not happen here, but most engagements around budgets begin here. Then you're going to take what you provided, go out to council, get council approval, and provide a draft. And you may then go, here is a draft, what have we forgotten? Or here is a draft, is there anything else that you would like us to consider? Do you have comments on the draft budget? And then here is where you're going to go out and say, Thank you for your input. Here is the final draft, the final budget. You may not go any further and engage any further. It's up to you. So this is where you need to decide. So often it goes from here to there to there. But think about the journey. This is the one thing I'd like to encourage you to do today, is to think about the journey you're going to take your community on, so that they can fully understand budgets and partner with you in giving you the kind of feedback that's truly going to give you value, that you can act on, and that you're not going to have information that surprises you when you're already on that draft budget, because you just haven't asked all the right questions or really engaged the community. So think about that. Right. Now, in terms of what we do at Bang the Table, for those who do not work with Bang the Table, we have, excuse me, we have a spectrum of tools that you can use to engage the community. And some of you might say, well, I can't just open up a discussion forum and leave it as a free-for-all. None of these tools allow that. We as an organization, one, will moderate for you 24/7. You can use the tools that you feel most comfortable with and that make sense for your project. We will never say go ahead and use them all. You're probably all familiar with quick polls and surveys. That's where you control the environment. In our tool, for example, people can see how many surveys were completed. That might encourage them to participate more. Some of the questions will allow you to show graphs, so that becomes public information. It just depends on what you choose. But we showed you the discussion forum, where you could ask the community, what are your priorities? Or you can ask the community a very specific question, such as you may ask, what are the greatest needs in support for businesses, which are in our current climate? It depends. You will know what you need to ask. The more specific you are, the tighter you are with your questions, the more specific your responses will be. You can open broad and say, what's important to you after we recover from COVID? Or you can say, we need to know how small businesses need assistance and what the biggest issues are. Or what is your biggest issue as a small business? And then open that discussion. Yes, it might be a can of worms, and that may not be the exact example that you use, but be specific. When you're specific and tight in your questions, you can also be specific and tight in how we moderate, and also keeping people on topic so that they don't go all over the show. They can't suddenly start talking about mortgages and jobs or whatever it might be. So think about what that looks like in doing your budgeting, how you want to present the information. Ideas, we saw that, how the community can provide ideas and that others can vote. So it's a nice way to engage. Also during COVID, there were lots of ideas how people supported one another. So it might be, you might open an ideation tool in a very light way, a Q&A tool that's about the budget, but an ideas tool that says, what are ways that you are saving money during this time, and how you would think about being economically wise going forward in your homes and for the city, whatever that looks like. But the reason for that would be to draw the community in and again to understand what's important to them. We obviously have a mapping tool, not necessarily something you would use in budgeting. Stories tool, I'm not sure, again, would you use it for budgeting? Stories would be the time that would be longer for the community to tell their story, to explain what has occurred, and it may be to help people express the hardships they have. That may be something that you could do, and open stories. This is one where you have control over what gets posted. So it's a mixed environment. If you want us to moderate, we'll do that for you, but it's something where you can control what appears on the site. The guest book really is the 2 minutes on the mic. You can control the length of comments. So you might say, what are your priorities for the next 5 years? Or what are your priorities coming out of COVID? And you can just have short comments. Again, you can decide what gets posted online. And the Q&A you have to take control over, because you respond to those questions publicly or privately, and you're able to then respond to the questions that make sense to everybody. Everybody can learn from in a public way. So these are tools that are available for us at Bang the Table. These are tools that we have available. We've got a whole spectrum that gives you options to engage your communities in ways that make sense for your project, in ways that give the community options to engage with you. They may not want to be tied into pass on your survey, but by opening up perhaps an ideas tool or a couple of discussion topics that may be the long form questions you ask here, it may well flush out something you just were not aware of. So keep that in mind. What's also really important is that you make sure that you provide people with information. So when you go into the online space, the big thing that you're doing is educating your community, helping people understand budgets. So often I see where communities have no idea what budgets are about, how they work, how does money get spent, and where the power lies for communities. The budgets are one of those things where it just are areas that there is no way that the community can have input. And they need to understand that clearly. And often that is not the case because it hasn't been necessarily conveyed to them. And if you're only getting a few people at your in-person events, use this online space. Your online space, when you're ready after COVID and things clear up and you can go back on in person, your online space can be the early starter to your engagement. You can start there by helping the community understand what the project is about, what it is you need to know, read information, begin early engagement. So you can consider that also as a very important part of informing your community. We work very much with the IAP2 spectrum of engagement, which reaches all the way from inform all the way to empowering the community. Now, budgets are not often about empowering. The only thing where you may empower is if you have X amount of money and 10 capital projects, and you say which is the most important, and that will be the one you start with. Or you might say, here are 10 capital projects, we have money for 5. Do a balancing act to see how you would spend the money and decide which top 5 we have to address. That may be the only way. So think about how you're going to engage the community. Inform them early days, take them on the journey, engage them, consult with them, and potentially collaborate with them. So think about what that looks like. And the tools available on your online space should help you educate. Tell people the journey that they're going to go on. Make sure that you have a human presence by using a listening tool. Any events, if you're going to do tele-town hall, if you're going to do a live stream session, you can advertise that now. FAQs obviously speak for themselves. Do you have a document library? As you can see, create, if there are photographs that you can use from past budgets to show the human connection. Do whatever you can to help the community understand what this is about and be connected. And video is going to be really powerful in this case. So during COVID, if you can use video, I really do encourage you to think about that. Right, as I've said before, this is not a random act of online engagement. It has to be strategic. It has to be thoughtful. You have to be clear about what it is you want to do. So you're going to build that strategy. You're going to think about who, what, and when. So plan your strategy. Keep it simple when you start out. Don't make it complicated. Put in a short introduction, perhaps a little video that talks about budgets. And you may go out and say, we find ourselves in a different world since we're beginning to come out of COVID-19. We don't know how long it's going to be that we're going to have to be in this space. So we want to hear from you. Your input is important to us, and we're going to use this online space to do this. And then you can say, here's what we're going to do with you. Think about standing in front of anybody, and you're explaining what you need to do, and that is what you'll put online. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get started and put the word out, and video is powerful. So use a video. Put documents in the library that are summary documents. Perhaps there are videos you can find online that talk about budgeting that you might be able to use. Past videos that you might have used. Infographics. Consider all those bits to create information. And you may go out in the early days just opening a Q&A. Begin to create that connection. You're going to have to do the work to get the community to the space. This is where your social media is incredibly powerful. We had a client reach out 2 days ago, and they already have over 700 surveys completed on their site. So people are there. They are providing input. What's important is just reach them, reach out to your community leaders, get to your counselors, ask them to help you get the word out. And then when you get people there, make it easy for them to do, make it easy for them to understand. Don't use concepts, don't use what I call city speak, use concepts and language that's easy for everyone to grasp. Right. How can you best serve the community and support them? So think about how you can serve the community. In this world we find ourselves, is it about making sure that you use video because it's a lot easier? There's so much happening out there, maybe just a video clip explaining. Be there so that if people are asking you questions that you can be responsive. So you, as I said, don't put the site up and go on holiday, facilitate. What you are going to need to do too is consider how you've got to work internally. How are you going to get support and approval for what you want to do? So think about that as well. Build that strategy, explain what you want to do, explain the strategy and thought behind it, and make sure you have that support and approval. You're obviously going to have a champion for your project, both whether you go externally into the community and reaching out internally to make sure that you have someone helping champion your process of budgeting. Or if you're the champion, that you help champion that you take the word up and down wherever it needs to go, and that you can reach out to that person or reach out to the folks that you need to reach out to drive this process forward. So you must have internal champions and external champions as much as you can. Make sure that you are also engaging the community on what they want to talk about. If you constantly go out there and ask them only what you want to talk about and they have no interest, you're wasting your time. And I know that sounds a little straight speak, but you're doing all this work to create a space. By drawing people in, talking about what you know is important to them, you are going to be able to draw them in and get them engaged with you, and then ask them difficult questions. You may want to incentivize. Some organizations have offered an iPad. It depends. That's something you can think about. So start small and be present and promote the successes and celebrate them with the community. So when you have small successes on your project, promote them internally. Let others see what successes you've had. Make sure you get the word out to your community. These are all things that you need to think about. And always close the loop and be grateful to people who've given input. I will go through the planning process with you now. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because time is getting tight. Lee, are there any questions I should answer before we go into this last phase?
Questions at this time?
Beg your pardon?
I think everyone's waiting to ask you questions at the end because we haven't received any questions to the question facility.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Right. So this is giving you a bit of a roadmap for planning. So project information, what you know and what you need to convey. Why do you need to go out and convey the information? So be very clear about why you're engaging and why this is important and why would the community participate. Who are you engaging? Who do you need to get to the table? Who did you engage in the past? What is it that you want to do? So understanding what that is. Your project objectives. Everybody's aware of SMART. So keep that in mind, that you use the SMART objectives in your approach. Level of engagement desired. Are you going to only have time to do a survey, or can you start early and open a Q&A, provide lots of information, do a video clip, and get the community connected with you so that you can reach out to them again when you want to put out that survey and perhaps a discussion topic. So understand the level of engagement. And you saw the examples I showed you. What are the parameters and limitations? You're not going to go out there and just let the citizens run amok and give you demands and tell you, you shouldn't be spending money on administration. That's never going to happen. Understand what the boundaries are and convey those boundaries and limitations to the engagement. Make sure you convey them, because when you convey them, the community will understand that they cannot talk about the money spent on admin, that there is going to be depreciation and additional money needed for equipment and suppliers within an organization, that there is going to be the cost of clearing snow, and that is a fixed cost we have to do when you live in Eastern Canada, and unfortunately Intermay as well. But be conscious of that as well, and convey that clearly, because when people understand it, They understand they can't go there. So I do want to kind of emphasize that. Think about the phases of your project. So you might go out early, have the budget set up with a Q&A, a video, educate people. Next phase may be right now we're ready to engage you in some information, you get feedback, then you're going to go back and say, this is what we've heard so far, council is currently reviewing, thanks to those who provided input. Then the final phase is, here's the final outcomes, here's the final document in the library. You might have your councillor responsible for budgets and the lead on budgets talk about the outcomes and thank everybody for what they did. So close the loop. Marry in-person and online activities. That is not going to happen now because we are talking during COVID, what it is you can do to engage the community. So you're going to make use of the video options because that is creating a person in the online space. That's creating that in-person connection, but in an online way. You can create those live stream sessions. You can do tele-town halls. These are all available now that you can do in the online space. Remember to make the space interesting, use good colors, infographics, graphics are powerful, colors that make the page interesting and not overwhelming, but fun to be there. So think about that too. Don't forget to promote. You could, just as you put the boards out on the streets to bring people to a meeting and send out emails and drop postcards, whatever that might be, you need to continue to promote. Social media, make sure that you plan the touch points so that you keep drawing the community back. And very important and respectful in building the trust is when you constantly close the loop and say thank you to people who participated. So think about those things. So then when you engage, you're going to conduct the engagement activities. You're going to do midway engagement review. This is what we've heard so far. Here's some more information for you to look at, and we invite you to be engaged on these other projects, in these other tools. Don't be stuck to your plan. If it is not working, change, make changes. Remember to do regular promotions, provide feedback through the updates, be responsive. If somebody's asking you a question, don't just ignore it, go there, respond. If somebody asks a question in a discussion forum, say, I don't quite get why we're using this budget for these initiatives. Be present, go and facilitate and go there. Show appreciation and make the outcomes easy to find. At the end of the day, the whole point of this is your data. You're going to collect it, you're going to analyze it, you're going to make sure that you get approval from decision makers. You're obviously providing the reports and data to those decision makers, and you must get back to your community. That data and outcome and the final decisions must go out to the community. And in using the online space, evaluate what you've done. What has worked? What hasn't worked? What might I want to try again? I've dipped my toe in the water. Think about what that can look like. Right. What is stopping you from using more tools to interact online? Granted, there are risks. Time could be a risk. You just don't have people. You don't have time to experiment. You have a short window to do this. That can be a risk factor. You don't have management buy-in. You don't have anyone to champion the project. You have community that has mistrust in what you've done in the past or what might have happened in the past. You don't have the budget to spend. Now, online, fortunately, does help you to save quite a bit of money. When you have a platform like ours, for example, you can engage and the cost is relatively low. Resources availability, who's going to manage the project, who's going to put the information there, and how is that going to work? Don't be afraid to adapt. So if you find something is not working, make the change. Don't run the risk of getting no engagement. These are risks that you can overcome. You know, find ways to get the help that you need. Keep it simple. Don't do too much. Make sure that ahead of time you say, here is my plan. Here's what I'm hoping to do. Here are examples where it's worked well. Go out to management to get that buy-in. Get someone who can help champion and get the word out. Mistrust, that means you're going to have to start early and engage in other ways, building relationships with that community. If you don't have budget, again, the online space is going to help you to be able to keep that budget tight. And then have a look at who can help do this. Again, keeping it simple in the online space is going to help you do that. Then, what to keep in mind. Start small, It doesn't have to be perfect. Use what you already have and know to build your online space. Start early and guide your community through the process. Use different tools for different purposes. Be present and close the loop. It is all about trust. So this is what I want you to keep in mind, and that's really what we've covered as we've gone through today's session. It's a challenge, but worth it, and be brave. And it isn't easy. I'm never going to say to you it's easy, but it's not an insurmountable difficult either. So please consider this. I'm here to support and help and answer questions, and certainly strategize with any of those who want to strategize. You can reach out to me by email as well. And Lee, we're waiting for some questions. We don't have a lot of time, but I'm happy to stay and answer as many questions as Mike Catherine.
We don't, and I must applaud you for being so time conscious. We're at 5 minutes to the hour. We're happy to take questions either using the question facility in GoToMeeting or activate your cameras or microphones.
Absolutely, and I'll activate my camera so that you can see me again. And so, I have a lot of examples. I've just shown you a few that are available that you can use during COVID, but I'm going to send that whole list along with the information so that you can click through them and go through them at your leisure, and to be able to then also see what's available.
Hi, Anthea.
Hi.
Sorry, it's Anne. There are a couple of questions in the questions tab. Do we have time, or do you want to address them by email? Or okay.
No, we have time.
Okay, so I can let people know that the presentation will be recorded or has been recorded and will be posted on our website as of tomorrow. So a question from Jack. Are there any special tools or techniques to engage with seniors or older segments of the population who might not be as tech savvy?
That's a really good question. And in terms of statistics, so I would say as little as 3 years ago, we were seeing that senior citizens up to maybe 65 and above were not able to cope with the online space. We're seeing a shift, and that really is going almost to 75 now, which is a really encouraging thing. And obviously, as your demographic ages, it's going to be a no-brainer eventually. But there are a few things you can do. So it may be that you actually just cannot go online. You may have to set up, and this a couple of cities have done, is they've set up folks on the telephone line where they then input the data into the online space, but using the phone. So they would respond, get the community senior citizen to call in. They would ask them the question from the survey and respond. Or they could say, here is the discussion topic, or what ideas do you have? And they add the ideas. So in your system, you can put any ideas that are from the project team or budget team has been entered either through telephone calls or information we've received from the community. So you can do it in a very, very hands-on way if the community cannot go there. However, we have found that the surveys the senior citizens find fairly easy to complete. And we're also seeing a good uptake in asking questions and the ideas tool, where it's just a quick type in. But you can also make available an email option, which a lot of senior citizens use. So click in the email, and they can then add a question there, and you can then post it to any of the tools on their behalf. So that's one way to help. The other thing you can do is the Teletown Hall, the senior citizen program that was done through Brampton, they used a Teletown Hall. So what they did is, it's not as easy if a senior citizen can't register, but they used a simple registration form that senior citizens could register. They got any of the facilitators that worked with senior citizens to help them to register, and they ran Teletown Halls. But often the best way, if you are in person, is actually to facilitate through a telephone line that people can connect with and use. It's not going to always be easy when it comes to senior citizens. A lot of them do know how, but there are some that it's going to be very much a hands-on to help those senior citizens.
And then
so we have one. Oh, sorry, Lee, go ahead.
So we have two questions really that speak to technology, the challenges of using technology. One is around, just basic internet access if you're rural. The other one is for those segments of the population, older Canadians and others, that may not be as tech savvy as others. Do you have any comments on those?
Okay, so I have to say that as a whole, the engagement tools, and I'm saying the ones that we are currently using. So there are many tools out there. There's Zoom, there are Microsoft Teams, there's GoToWebinar, there's the Google system. There are so many tools out there that you can use that I do encourage you to think carefully about whether you use them, because it adds an additional level of complexity for citizens. And I'm just going to show you one example of, I'm just going to escape here quickly, of how you can engage the community using what makes sense and not going to the Zoom route. So this specifically was the Newfoundland Medical Association that needed to engage the community. And what they did is they had to engage on complex issues, but they kept this simple. So what they did is they had to engage in all these areas, but they took the committee on a journey. And these are busy physicians. So when they clicked into here, all they found were 2 questions and the question and answer. So pressure points in a hospital system, hospital support and ancillary services. So if you click into this, you can simply very quickly click in and participate. So you can sign in. They wanted registration because it was required, but it is not necessary to do. The way the tools you work can be very straightforward. You can have tools that don't require a registration. Q&A, they simply click in the Q&A here and start typing. So I'll just put the word name here. So you can type in the name and you can just simply start typing. A lot of the tools can be very clean and simple to use. But the one thing you have to do, and I strongly encourage you to do this, is to make sure that you explain to people what to do. Because this is not a website, this is a dynamic space. You can go in here and tell people, step 1, do this, step 2, step 3, explain it so that they can do it. Simply click in the space, register, sign up, and add your question. That generally we find people can do, and right up into fairly senior. If you have diverse communities, we suggest that you make use of something like Google Translate, or as you see here with Brampton, Brampton made use of, they use Google Translate. I'm actually going to show you one more where they didn't. So TransLink made use of other documents and videos and information that was translated. So bear that in mind so that you can reach other diverse communities. So as we scroll down here, you will see how they address that. As long as you have a keyboard that can type in that language, you can then address the information in that space. And you can also use a video clip to explain to people what to do, that you can show them what they have to do. So that addresses potential issues with senior citizens, potential language issues, community groups of people that may not have very high levels of education, helping them engage. Another really important point is don't use language that people don't get. Don't use city speak. You need to be aiming your language level at a grade 5 to 8 level, no more complex than that. So remember that. When it comes to communities that have poor connectivity, there are 2 things that can happen. One, often we find the mobile phones work, even if they don't have internet access or computers at home. A lot of the communities do tend to have mobile phones, and the tools that on our platform, for example, work really well in the mobile application. When it comes to all these other add-ons, think carefully about what you're going to do. You don't have to use all the videos and the Zooms and the whatever else. If it is not going to use, take people through a step-by-step journey, as I showed you what they did with the Newfoundland Medical Association. They had very clearly indicated the areas that they wanted to engage. And then what they did was they broke it out into simple concepts. Less is more. So those are things to think about in the online space. I will send to Anne and Lee some blog posts and information that addresses this as well. And reality, sometimes you're just not going to be able to use the online space. It makes it really difficult. You may then simply use a telephone line, phone the community, and complete the information over the phone.
Terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone participating. A special thank you to Anthea for your time. Very topical, very timely. And again, as part of CAGFO's weekly Wednesday webinar series, which we'll expand upon next week with another presentation on data-driven online tools. So thank you, everyone. We will be posting this online, so register for our webinars, check for the presentations, and stay connected and safe. Wishing everyone a great week. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.